Visual novels were first introduced to me through anime with things like Clanad and Shuffle and whatever other weird stuff I got up to as a 12-year-old. Oddly enough, video game wise, I didn't really play any visual novels until Ace Attorney on the DS, and I didn't really even get those until I was around 18 or 19. So, it wasn't that long ago that I started playing this genre, but I found a couple games, some better known than others, that I think are really good on the Switch, PS4, PC, and even PS5. First on the docket is Stories from Soul the Gundog. It was released in February of 2025 for PC, Switch, and PS5. It was developed by a small but capable team at Space Colony Studios. It doesn't seem like they've done more work just yet, but I'm super excited to see what's next for them. If you're interested, they actually have a Ko-Fi with a link to pins, stickers, and a poster all based on Gundog. The link is below. Stories from Seoul was published by Chinese studio Astrobal Games, who partner with many small companies to release titles like Evo Tinction, Gure, and Do Jungle. The pronunciation of those is probably totally wrong, but you know what? You figure it out. The premise of Seoul is pretty simple. You're a security officer. The premise of Seoul is simple. You're a security officer who's been set on a ship full of troublemakers. One of them, your girlfriend, seems to be the center of something much bigger. To immerse yourself fully, you choose your first and last name as well as your gender. No matter what gender, you're getting a girlfriend. If only it was so simple for the 80s otaku, right? I'm just playing. Though it's obvious from the cover art and sci-fi setting alone, this game is hitting on a very specific era of anime, either early Gundam or maybe even Space Battleship Yamato. It's also very inspired by PC-98 visual novels like Possessioner, which you've probably happened upon at one time or another on the web. And that was probably for its frisky aspects, if we're being honest. Stories from Seoul has the iconic border and clickable options like look, move, use, and all that stuff, but you can also choose 3 styles of art. There's a black and white Tezuka look, an 80s-centric Harlock look, and a colorized PC Engine CD appearance I ended up loving. It's very cel-shaded in that early 90s way that I miss, and you can also remove scan lines and swap between text types. I just really appreciated the detail here. I thought it was really impressive and just a beautiful touch. One thing that I felt could have been better or more varied, though, was the amount, or rather lack, of original soundtrack. What was there was good, yet a bit repetitive. I really only remember 3 or 4 tracks and 2 or 3 sound effects. Plus, for those of you with some reading problems, you're also out of luck on voice acting. Back to the positives, there are a handful of really polished and charming action cutscenes that I adored. Check out this one. It's also no easy feat to create cliché character appearances that still feel fresh like they do here for the other cast members. You've got the husky lead of engineering who's appropriately haggard, and you've got a drunken captain who rides that feminine and masculine attire all the way to the moon. Quite literally. Must say, with a cast of around 8, more than half are female, and 1 is non-binary. I didn't really expect that because the era of anime isn't very female positive, but Seoul is written in a way that it doesn't matter, a la early Star Trek, which is really based and appreciated. Speaking of the writing, the narrative is very interesting and thoroughly explained without being boring. It balances speech and narrations well, and it properly sets things up about the setting in less than an hour of playtime. There are lots of choices to make, some timed, some optional, and I found 2 endings within an 8-hour window. However, there are just about no walkthroughs or guides on YouTube or Reddit, but for trophy hunters, the details basically tell you what to do for some secret interactions. You're also able to save and load whenever, so feel free to save scum and check your task list for hints. Like any good point-and-click adventure, you're rewarded for looking around thoroughly and talking to people more than once. I also never found puzzles to be too hard, except for one on an alien ship. I couldn't figure out how to get a code to a captain thing, so if any of you know, that'd be sick. Again, that's an optional part though. So, all in all, I really liked this game, and the $50 I spent on it new from GameStop was worth it to me. If that's too steep for you, digitally, this is a $15 USD release. If you even slightly like sci-fi, I say play it, but if you're someone who's just getting into visual novels, this might not necessarily be the best one if you don't have an interest in that subgenre. Second on the list is Spirit Hunter NG, which dropped in 2018 and is loosely connected to Deathmark 1 and 2. It's on the Vita, PS4, Switch, and PC, much like the other two. This is a horror visual novel through and through, focusing on folk horror and the occasional jump scare. To be fair, the horror art is very unsettling and tastefully graphic, and it's done by the artist Kera, who's working on Silent Hill F as we speak. I'm a horror veteran, so nothing scares me anymore, but for the weenies in the crowd, there's a tuned down horror mode where jump scares are totally off. This is called Default Mode. Spirit Hunter NG is developed by Experience, a company that often puts out hardcore dungeon crawlers like Demon Gaze 1 and 2, as well as Undernauts, which is a game that no one talks about. The director of those games, Matoya Ataka, also directed NG. Before I speak on the art and mechanics of NG, I have to compliment how well this game's characters are written. Your main character you get to name and slightly personalize aesthetically seems like he's going to be just another rebel teen type, but he's written in a way that avoids bombastic lashing out moments and instead seems to be more empathetic and brave in a pretty realistic way. Another girl, who ends up being an occult idol, seems like she's going to pull some cutesy timid act, but she never does, and these archetypes all get flipped in a down-to-earth way, thankfully. I also appreciate the brief setup stage because the horror sections are so much more fun. NG is a very active visual novel, so you're constantly searching new locations for clues, objects, and people to chat with. Puzzles come down to selecting the right partner who will be able to break a lock, distract a guard, or just not run away. Your partners can also die based on your decisions in life or death segments. Luckily, you can save and reload, or fail and restart from the start, or a checkpoint. If you're in a situation where it just seems like no items are working, NG is very event-based, so my advice is to run into a different room to see if you've missed a required cutscene. On top of the fun ghost encounters, there's also a facial expression response system. From angry to neutral to exhilarated, your reaction just affects what the others think of you. NG's story, again, is very character-focused, so I think most of the charm in the game is what these characters say in response to both you and the supernatural. Visually, NG looks really nice. Characters are done in almost a soft Copic marker colorization, while the dark, low-lit backgrounds are grumpy and appropriately detailed. It's supposed to be 1999, and outside of skinny glasses and a brick cell phone, you probably wouldn't guess as much. There's no voice acting whatsoever, so the ambient noises, total lack of sound, or the jazzy tracks have to carry you through. While I really like the soundscape, that jazz track gets stretched very thin. Still, I can deal with it knowing it's inevitable. It's a pretty low-budget game, but regardless, I feel like it's really good. With about a 12-hour runtime, I surprisingly never felt bored, and I'd totally say this is one of my favorites from the list, even more so if you're a big J-horror fan. It's also not a very expensive game, either physically or digitally, plus it's always on sale, it seems like, on Steam, so you should pick it up if you really like horror stuff. Third on the list blends strategy gameplay with a supernatural visual novel. I had my eye on it for some time, but I finally played Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters. Having released in 2014, it was a very late addition to the PS3 and Vita. Since then, it's also been ported to the PC and PS4, but unfortunately not on the Switch. In North America, it was published by Axis Games, a la Tokyo Xanadu and Guilty Gear. In Japan, it was published by Arc System Works, aka Double Dragon and Persona 4 Arena. Lastly, in Europe, it was published by NIS America. Funnily enough, it was developed by Now Production and Toybox Inc., the madmen behind Deadly Premonition. They always seem to be pushing boundaries with their weird games, and this is no different. Tokyo Twilight was a title I went out of my way to track down in 2019 after I noticed that the cover artist and character designer for Fire Emblem Three Houses also worked on this. I was a little sad to see that in-game, the style of art only seems reminiscent of the designer's style in the eyes, but still, the fluid movements of the characters is captivating to watch. Red is also my favorite color, and it's cool to see how dark and muted every scene and background is, along with red tints that work to unsettle you. I also think that the UI is kind of ahead of its time. It looks really fun, especially in the office setting, and it kind of reminds me of what Persona 5 ended up doing. The other artistic choice that really worked for me was the sick soundtrack, giving alt-rock and jazz with a heavy guitar melody. The music also changed enough that I never got bored. By the way, it's about a 17-hour game. I'll talk story and mechanics soon, but you've got to keep in mind that if you have a hard time reading for long stretches of time, there's absolutely no voice acting. So Tokyo Twilight's actual narrative is pretty light. You're just a boy transfer student who happens to get into a Ghostbuster-adjacent group called the Gatekeepers, and all of the intrigue comes from accepting ghost hunt quests on the company's behalf. Your team is chock full of characters that are far too serious on the surface, but as things go on, they lighten up and peel back just enough for you to care about them. The biggest downside to the game also comes with interaction. There's this odd ring that has the 5 senses on it. If you've ever seen Kowloon High School Chronicles, and a couple other that I can't think of off the top of my head, they also do this 5 sense ring thing, and it just never works for me. Instead of clicking normal word or action responses, you'll hit, for example, the hand to shake hands. That's fine, but sometimes the action gets responses you can't begin to guess will happen, and it ruins the moment. Occasionally during an investigation, the sense ring will also pop up, and it makes more sense. An example being the ectoplasm leaking from a wall plate. If you sniff, it'll smell like sulfur, and using the game logic, sulfur equals ghost appearance. Despite the dumb sense ring, I still think the way in which you get to learn from the characters is well-paced without changing much based on choice. Tokyo Twilight is sort of untraditional in the way they prioritize the daily life stuff, because to me, the focus is on the chessboard strategy battles. Each fight has a specified number of minutes, which is actually just turns, where blue tiles are easy ghosts and the red tiles are the main baddie. You and some teammates have to dish out and take hits in that limited time, and as you go through the game, you can buy better weapons and items to speed the process up. You can predict hits by the scream gauge, but sometimes ghosts will hide in gray tiles as inanimate objects, causing you to hurriedly find them in a game of hide and seek. This style of area and ghost change all the time, so you'll never get sick of that board style. It's the most unique and engaging aspect of the game, but it also makes it a really tough sell. If a Persona-adjacent cast mixed with Danny Phantom sounds interesting to you, try this one out. It's only $10 USD on Steam, $20 on the PS3, and around $15 on the Vita. For the 4th game on the list, Amanda is making a guest appearance since the games are more fresh in her mind.
Coffee Talk, originally released in January of 2020 by Toge Productions, was among the first of the games that was added into my collection. I feel like it's more well known at this point, but being a video game beginner, I hadn't heard of it when it was first gifted to me. However, Sheep knew that I was interested in visual novels, and this was the perfect pick for me. Before meeting Sheep, the only visual novel I had seen was Doki Doki, and I lost touch with my friend before we ever got to the interesting part. In a way, Coffee Talk reminds me of that game. You play as a barista at a late-night coffee shop, listening in on and conversing with customers, many of which are not human, and by the end of the story, you're prompted to replay the game with your new information. I loved Coffee Talk, and shortly after starting it, I acquired Coffee Talk 2. Coffee Talk 2 was released in 2023, and my physical copy came with a gorgeous keychain, download code for the soundtrack, and an adorable sticker sheet. Coffee Talk 2 features both new and familiar characters, and has such a cozy feel after loving the first one. Much like Coffee Talk, it prompts you to replay, but unfortunately, I really struggled with this part. I felt like there was way more repetition than in the original, so I never technically finished, but I did really enjoy the game. Both versions also offer a version of free play where you can play as the barista, so if you want to mess around with the coffee bar but take a break from the story, you can. The game doesn't include any voice acting, but that didn't bother me since I'm an avid reader. The soundtrack honestly never got repetitive to me, but if it does end up being a problem for you, there is an option to switch out the song whenever you like. It essentially functions as a radio and cycles through different songs, and in general it really fit the vibe of the cafe, so it never really bothered me. If you're interested or already a fan, a new game is set to release this year called Coffee Talk Tokyo. It is said to, quote, bring the warmth, heart, and delicious drinks from the previous games to an all-new cafe. In general, Coffee Talk is relatively inexpensive digitally, and a great choice if you're looking for a cozy new cafe to hang out in.
The last game on the list is a doozy, and my feelings on it are pretty mixed. That is Sukiime, a piece of blue glass moon. It's about a 30-hour game, but closer to 50 if you want to see all the endings. I have yet to get even one, clocking 20 hours in. There are 3 good endings and 21 bad, or somewhat ambiguous endings, with many of them focusing on the 5 girls you'll be seeing a whole lot of. Glass Moon is a remake of a PC-exclusive 2000 horror eroge. If you don't know, eroge essentially means sexually explicit, and of course, it did well in the doujin market, getting even a 2008 12-episode anime. The original Sukiime has some very early 2000s, almost deviant art levels of artistry, so it's just rough to look at for me now. I gotta apologize to the OG fans, but I just don't like the look. Shortly after the anime aired, a remake with updated visuals was announced, but it ended up getting delayed all the way to 2021 when it was released in Japan, and early 2024 in the US for PS4 and Switch. There's currently a continuation called Red Garden still in the works, but there's no release date as of right now. Sukiime Remake was published by Aniplex, and the quality and budget really show. There is full-on voice acting, amazing but sparse cutscenes, great backgrounds that constantly change, and the characters are developed and rendered in a way that feels modern, yet calls back to the 2008 charm. There's also a robust soundtrack with so many songs that it blows all other visual novels out of the water. You've got metal, humming, operatic pieces, and everything in between. The original developers and remake devs, Type Moon, also worked on the fairly high-profile series Fate Stay Night. If you know Fate from the anime first, the visual novel is also gonna shock you when you see some skin-on-skin action. Just so you know, Sukiime Remake features none of this indecency, so you're gonna have to do some searching elsewhere. You're welcome. When it comes to the plot, it's one of the slowest, most bizarrely paced stories you'll ever see. For 4 to 5 hours, it feels like so little is making sense, and then boom, you are hit with a bat to the face before the game tries to ease you back into a sense of normalcy before bang, you're shot off into a chaotic mess of supernatural mystery. This game is made for the 14-year-old anime watcher still lurking inside of you that craves vampires, fan service, and heroic battles that all pay off when your lead gets the girl. It's Rosario Vampire meets Clannad. More often than not, the story feels cliché, and part of that is the dull narration made to world build a rich castle, while also preaching about technology bad. Did you know it's ruining a whole generation? Yes, thank you for trying to be woke. But never mind, actually, because they leave in an oddly out-of-place assault play scene, and I just have to let it be known that this game is a mess. At worst, I find it dull enough that I start to skip at random, and at its best, I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for what comes next. Sukiime Remake is made in a very streamlined fashion, with an autoplay, skip, and log available alongside toggleable voice acting, text speed, saving, and a flowchart system. During gameplay, your actions can affect a lot when it comes to who you see and where you are. You can go back to see all other options on the fly. It's honestly seamless, and the day count allows you to know exactly where you are in the story, so day 15 is the last day typically. I'm struggling to say whether I really like the game or not, and if you can't tell yet, this is probably a love it or hate it experience. Things get so good just to land flat, but maybe it's just me. The game knows its audience, and you've got to decide if it's for you or not. I came across the Switch Collector's Edition for around $100 at a local store, but even the standard prices for Switch and PlayStation hang around $50. To save yourself some money, you'll have to emulate it because there's no Steam release and they don't know when it'll come out. And we've made it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and I would really love to know what visual novels on the Switch or PS4, PS5, or Steam that you really love and would recommend. Catch you in the next one.